We've got Deneen Kenchington, boys education expert, deputy head teacher. Oh, you've gone.
I'm
That
here.
was right. That was really badly timed. Um, boys education expert, deputy head teacher at Burndown Upper School in Dorset. Yeah, and you know, how did we come about? You can tell the masses.
Oh, our origin story.
Mm.
I work at Ferndown Upper School with my colleague Ollie McVeigh. We have been working on boys ed together for about 5 years. I research into boys education. I've been doing that for about 10 years. And we met at Ferndown and we decided that we came across this type of research from the University of Ulster called the Taking Boys Seriously principles that really seemed to nail what the boys needed and what the boys wanted. And we started to build a program. And Ollie was doom scrolling TikTok one evening and came across you reading.
Did
And
I ensorcell him?
you ensorcelled him. And then he messaged me and was like, we have a phrase saying he's a bit of us. And so Ollie messaged me saying, I think Ben's a bit of us. So I slid into your DMs, I don't know if you remember, and was like, Ben, this is why you need me. It wasn't that this is why I need you. This is why you need me.
Yeah.
And I think I chucked you some LinkedIn stuff and just stuff that we've been doing. And you responded.
I think for me, obviously, I receive a variety of cold outreach, which is what I would call that. And, some of it is ensorcelling and some of it is frankly quite disturbing. But yeah, that was something that what I've been doing was sort of working across books, making content, writing books, doing book related things. But I think with the TikTok, it's great for sharing that kind of upfront, this is a great book, look at this, or this is that. And I was doing these live reads at the time where I was sitting down and, for a long time, for an hour and a bit. And but what I was looking for really was a way of maybe taking that and actually moving that work on and doing something a little bit more hands-on, but also a little bit more, I don't know, it sounds bad, but maybe a little bit more worthwhile, a little bit more like, okay, let's kind of not do something so surface level, let's get like really kind of deep into this. And so when you sent me a message, I just thought, oh, here's an opportunity. It could be terrible, obviously, but it was like, oh, this is actually someone who's doing work along the lines that I would like to do too. So yeah, we had that conversation, didn't we? And
we did, and I was gutted because I was in France, so Ollie came and met you, and it was his job to ensorcell you, and I was like, don't mess it up.
He bought me a pint.
Did he? There you go. And then we just kind of, it went from there, didn't it? Because we saw a gap. And I think, as we've spoken about before, we know that boys have a word deficit when they arrive at primary school. We know due to research that they come with a significant vocabulary deficit. And we know that the numbers to do with boys' literacy just compound on top of that. And we do have a literacy problem specifically with young males in this country. And the GCSE results show that that is the case. And so this was our opportunity to kind of bring those two worlds together. You being incredibly passionate about what you do, and Ollie and I being passionate to the point of obsession about what we do, and also working with the boys and knowing what they needed. And so the Boys Literacy Project was born. And I think that there's been some amazing moments. Putting you for the first time in front of a cohort of teenage boys was just amazing. And, getting to watch the way that they responded to real lived experience to your story, really. And, I don't know if Ollie and I have ever told you that we stood off in a cupboard, jumping up and down and hugging each other when you were talking to them, because we just loved the way that you connected with them from the moment that they got in the room. And you talked to them in a way that we couldn't, and educators don't. And, I think to have somebody like you sit in front of them and call them out for not backing themselves or for saying that they don't know or they don't have an opinion was absolute gold. To see the look on their face as you were like, well, I'm not accepting that. Tell me, explain yourself. And I think that's been really incredible. And talking about failure and having that discussion about things that you've tried that haven't worked out, things that you've tried that have worked out. They love hearing your story about moving to France and your your sports experience, and to know that you haven't got it all figured out every step of the way. And you know, I think it's probably worth you saying about how like you communicate that with boys, because it's a unique way that you do it, and the feedback we've received is that they really resonate with it, Ben.
I'd love to talk more about it. I think one of the things for me, like, just let's kind of set the scene a little bit before we do that. So I did a talk at Hay Festival last year with TikTok, and I was on a panel, and we'd been doing this work, but there was a guy from the National Literacy Trust as well. So, you know, we kind of connect about that. And I'd learned a little bit about the kind of the problem, the disparity in boys' literacy. You know, I kind of, it's one of those things you sort of know unconsciously. I did English literature at uni. You look around, there's not many boys there. You just think, well, maybe it's not literacy, but boys just aren't that into English literature. You know, it's mostly girls there, which is obviously fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
That
then,
works.
but actually, you know, then as an adult, my sort of school friends are all kind of readers to varying degrees. Not all of them, actually. That's not fair, but you know, there's some regular readers in there. But my rugby teammates weren't necessarily. You know, I kind of didn't have to proselytize, but a couple of them would eventually come and be like, "Oh, think about picking a book up. What should I start with?" So I mean, I suppose what I'm saying is I came about the kind of problem informally, and then later
Yeah.
like read some of the kind of studies, the national literacy one in particular, about like, you know, the problem. But I'd love to know, you've been working on these things for a long time. You're
Yeah.
obviously, you know, an education professional, you're a teacher. Like what got you into this problem? Like, and how did you come about it? How did you begin to find out more broadly about it? And, you know, what kind of inspired you to kind of take action on this one? Because,
I
you know,
understand.
there's lots of different
Yeah.
things you could set your mind to.
Yeah, and I think that I get asked that a lot, especially being a woman, in terms of why this, why here. The easy answer is that I was a vice principal of a boys' school in a really disadvantaged area. It was hard. It was the best experience, but I saw our boys not getting equity. I saw them not being a level playing field. I saw that on all levels, and it started to really get on my nerves. And I didn't
What does
like.
that mean? They weren't getting equity?
Um,
Sorry to cut in on you.
no, it's fine. So there weren't as many opportunities. There was a negative language around them. I would turn up places like chess competitions with my boys, and there would be a kind of sideways glance, because I suppose I was bringing a big group of disadvantaged boys to a place where perhaps it wasn't perceived they should be. There was a narrative of low expectation around them, not them. They didn't have the low expectation, but there was a narrative of low expectation around them. And it started to make me feel intensely uncomfortable. And I was really naive, Ben, because I didn't realize at the time that that was existing. And I suppose that I just didn't realize. And that was how naive I was 15 years ago, what have you. And so as time went on, I realized that there were lots of STEM opportunities, but not necessarily literary opportunities. There were lots of creative writing competitions and not so much for the boys. And it confused me, because books are my life as well. And, you know, and I saw so many boys that were interested in reading, but the lack of equality didn't end there. It was in every aspect of their life. It was access to mental health services. It was access to support from having been a victim of violence. It was the way that they were dealt with, the way they were spoken to by the police, by external agencies. I watched a really uncomfortable conversation with, you know, some Ofsted inspectors, and it was a long list over a long time of me going, nah, this isn't right. This isn't right. There's not the high expectation around my boys as there is around everybody else. And I had worked in a girls' school and I'd worked in a boys' school, so I think I'm able to say that really clearly. And so it just something clicked in me, and I just couldn't leave it. And you know me, Ben, I just can't leave stuff. And having two brothers as well, it just something clicked. And so fast forward, I then started doing more and more work with them. I was recognised by the Chartered College for a fellowship with my work with disadvantaged boys, and that got me more avenues and more avenues. I then went into educational research and started looking at the critical consciousness of working class boys and what it really meant to be a young man in a situation that you might not understand, and your place in society. And then, I just ended up at Ferndown and wondered what that would mean in a different setting, and needed somebody like-minded. And I tripped and fell into Ollie's classroom, quite literally. And it turned out that he was really passionate about literacy. And we started looking, right? We started looking, and we realized that boys were not reading. I know it sounds obvious that we're saying it out loud now, but it wasn't that obvious back then. And why weren't they reading? And, and so we found this research, the Taking Boys Seriously principles, that really values the voice of boys, really looks at what it means to be a young man in today's society, really considers how that impacts the pedagogy, really considers how that impacts how they view the world. And it isn't to go easy on boys. That's not the answer. Oh, it's a boy, they can't. Oh, it's a boy, they don't have nice handwriting. Oh, it's a boy, their book is... No. That isn't it. It's actually to double down on your high expectation, because they'll rise to it. And, our work is evidence that they rise to it. We've had a clear impact in school. You've helped us have that impact in school on outcomes, on behaviour, on attendance. But we've now been able to take that work into other schools. We've now been able to take that nationwide, because it works. I don't want to say it's a silver bullet, but it makes a dent. And that is for sure. That is for sure. And so the literacy element is so important, because it links to nearly every aspect of their life. It links to every aspect of their life. And we understand that boys that are literate and who have a broad range of access to stories, their mental health is better. Not my words, it's research. That their life opportunities are better. Not my words, it's research. They are able to access curriculum in a way that people with less words just can't. It's fact. And it isn't just about English. It's about every subject in the curriculum. And stories are powerful, aren't they? They really are.
I think they are. And the thing that I've been kind of, I suppose, arrived at through the work that we've done was sort of then to communicate to the boys that, look, these skills will set you free. Being able to read and be able to stand up and tell someone what you think and be able to back up your opinion or your argument. These are skills that, they're not limited to books, but books can ground you in those things. And books are this kind of story vehicle, but they're a perspective vehicle for other people who aren't like you as well. Even if the first instance you might want to read about someone who is like you. And I think I'm working on a longer piece, maybe about how boys have been kind of closed out from books at the sort of early stage. And I think part of that is maybe related to like the literary canon that was once dominated by, all the like old white guys. That was like, and that is still a bit of a prevailing narrative, but I don't think it's true anymore. I think now there's loads of different voices and perspectives. But in a way, it's almost, there's this kind of underlying current of like, oh, this isn't for you. I'm kind of looking into that and wondering how true that is, because you can always read those older people, but it's like, I think, reading will give you the tools to then self-educate. You can transcend your own environment. You can use those skills to go and learn anything you want and do anything you want. But if you don't learn those skills at that early opportunity, you're right. You're kind of, all those avenues are closed to you, and you're just stuck in this small place where, some of us are lucky to come from, environments where that's not true, but not everyone is. And not learning those skills mean that you're just, that's it for you, and kind of no one cares, and it's it's hard. So I think I'd love to talk more about the high expectations as well, but sorry, you're about to say something.
No, I think, and one of the things, and this is why this work we're doing has really changed it, and we've been able to take this out nationally. It was like, I think it was like in our second or maybe third meeting where you were like, Deneen, you don't have to read it doesn't have to be a tome. There are really excellent short stories. And I was like, what? And I think Ollie always, whatever we're doing, the conferences we go to, Ollie always tells the story of us getting an email from a teacher at our school saying, this child, who you would never expect, was caught reading Hemingway under the desk in his maths lesson. What am I going to do? And we were like, let him. but that was The Old Man and the Sea, wasn't it? And that was the book that you kind of, your short story curriculum that we're working on at the moment, and kind of it was a gateway drug therefore into it. And they felt so good because they'd read Hemingway, right? They'd read Hemingway, and there was a really amazing moment when you said to them, you know, boys, this isn't about a big fish. And they were just like, right. And you know, then that was the conversation about masculinity and trying, and is it luck or do you make your own luck? And there was just incredible discussions that we would not have access through the curriculum. We just wouldn't have.
And I want to just come back on that, because actually, when I was younger, when I was kind of in my mid-20s, I had a rugby contract. I had a rugby move fall through, and I didn't know what to do. And I ended up in Sydney, and I thought I'd be there for 3 months, and then I'd come back for the beginning of the next rugby season or whatever it was. But I loved it. I had a great time. I ended up staying there for about a year, and I got a coaching job in a private school there. So in the morning, I was barista. I was running a cafe with this chef, and we'd open up and run it till lunch. Then I'd have a couple of hours, and I'd go over to the school and coach rugby 4 days a week. And I had two teams who I'd see twice a week each. And I remember kind of chastising this talented child one day because he did something that was a bit sort of mean and miserable, but he was the kind of role model for all the others. And I was sort of had to talk to him about, his talent, the responsibilities of his talent, leadership. And I kind of, it was pretty personal, really. And I did give him a bollocking in a kind of quite essential way. But I think it was important to do that and then drip feed him responsibility so he could rise to the level of his talent and become the leader that his mates needed. But maybe I wasn't entirely aware of what I was doing in that first instance. But the teacher said to me afterwards, he said, I wish I could talk to them like that. And I think there's something, like you say, this isn't a whole sort of let's chastise the teachers for not doing, because they're constrained by their environment, by their pre-existing relationship with everybody, by a curriculum. They've got all these other things. So I think part of the value in what we've done has been in like someone else come in, hasn't it? Like giving them a different person.
Definitely. And teachers do an amazing job. But there is a role we're performing, and it isn't the one that you are. And also, I think one of the really interesting moments and that changed me and my outlook was when I was kind of doing the same thing with a different young man that you're talking to him about success. And he looked at me and says, you've got no idea what success is. You're still at school. And it was like, and he then berated me and saying, how can you talk to me about what it means to be successful? I can look up your wages. I know exactly what, you haven't done well, miss. You're a nice person, but you haven't done well. And I was like, thank you for the feedback. I'd like to think in my sphere I've done okay. But to have somebody else who, but it's their perception, isn't it? And he said it with love, but it was his truth. It was what he believed. And so, we know through kind of cultural capital and things that you have to put the best in front of these children. They deserve to see the best of everything. And, I'm mad passionate about boys' education. I love Shakespeare, but I'm not the best at everything or in fact at anything, Ben. But, so going out and finding people like you that have been so excellent in their sphere and have lived in other ways to come in and then say, you know what, this was my experience. This is what I have learned through life. This is how you fail well as a man. This is how you succeed well as a man. It has made all the difference. Culturally in our school, it's made the difference. Individually to our boys, it has made the difference. We found out, and we didn't know, that they were reading self-help books. They were reading Aurelius, weren't they? And we didn't know that about our boys until we were able to open up these massive discussions around, well, the Marcus Aurelius thing was just mind-blowing. So it's a case of opening up their world. And especially when we're talking about boys from particular backgrounds, from those disadvantaged backgrounds. I'm from a disadvantaged background myself, I get it. To open up those worlds has just been incredible. And the reason the Literacy Project is so important to us, and we're still developing it now, aren't we, is that we can see that it's had a tangible impact on actual boys' lives, on their outcomes, on the way they choose to behave. The power of a Ben Day at our school is phenomenal. It's phenomenal.
Ben Day.
Ben Day.
I look forward to doing it, and that's the thing is, I don't know. In terms of what you're saying as well, I think there's something about the communication tools that sport gives you, and when we got a coaching badge, the coach, you'd think it was a sort of dictatorial, go and do this. but it's more that you set things up and you ask questions, and you're a constant question talker. So actually, what you're really trying to do is kind of elicit problem solvers. You know, people that have a situation and they figure out the solutions or the range of solutions, and then they can do it. And obviously, sport has, you know, it's not perfect, but there's much more of a kind of peer-to-peer dialogue maybe than there would be in a classroom, where quite necessarily, like, you know, you're not their peer, you're not their mate.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Yeah.
that's what that is. But I wonder how much of that, thinking about it, is actually like a carry through to the things I do with the boys, because yeah, it's almost, while the sessions have a point and things that I want to get get across and talk about, that there is an element of like, this is your time. What do you
Yes.
want? What do you want to talk about? What are you interested in? What interests you about this? And giving them responsibility over their own time in a way. And actually, didn't we have one where one group hadn't read the Hemingway? Like, you know, there was the older group where they'd all read it,
Yeah.
apart from one or two who were then quite embarrassed that they hadn't. And I think
Yeah.
that's quite powerful in a group of boys. If you're the one left out because you've not done something that was perfectly in your power to do,
Yes.
that's quite embarrassing. But I think with that other group, most of them hadn't read it, and it was sort of like getting across to them that I'm here to talk to you about this. I've committed to you, and you've let me down, and then you've actually let yourselves down, because now we're just here wasting our time. And then
I got to see that conversation, and I think, you know, the fact that there are different constraints around that, and the fact you actually used that phrase, I'm here committing my time, and you know, I've done this with the other group, we're not able to do that, and you held each boy to account, which was incredible. You know, why haven't you? And they could hear that their words weren't sufficient, and so, but it was a non-judgmental situation, because she was like, right, well, what the hell are we going to do about it then? What's the next, you know? And I guess when you're talking about your coaching, that's what you're saying. It wasn't a case of, you know, it's like, feel it, now let's do something about it. And there were two members of that particular group that have subsequently gone on to read well. And one of them, I think that you've been told about, I think you gifted him a book, and then he was able to go ahead and read that, and has continued to do so. So it's, you know, boys love challenge. And one of the things that Ollie and I talk about as we go into different schools is that we say that we don't want a comfort-based approach, that the evidence tells us that a comfort-based approach is not helpful, that we challenge in structured, in expert ways, and the boys will rise to it. They will rise to it when there's the right culture and they've got the space to express themselves, just like you give them, Ben. They will rise to that challenge. And that's why we now have boys reading Hemingway. That's why we now have boys wanting to take steps into English literature. The work that Ollie's done around English language has been phenomenal. We have exceptional levels of boys taking that subject at our school. But, you know, we're now making ways into getting to access literature, because they know that it's valuable, and they've had somebody else tell them that, you know, not me, who hasn't been very successful, but you, that really has. And I just think that's a marvelous thing. It's incredible.
I think, again, this is it's a bit of a sporting carry through, where it's like, you know, challenge, and you know, and everybody's different, but I always responded quite well to challenge. I always loved, you know, when we played the better teams. I was like, great, like this is like easy to get me excited. Do you know what I mean? I'll definitely play well, because I'm excited by this. And what really, I told this story at Hay. What really struck me was in one of the early sessions where they were a bit of a naughty group, and like, not in a kind of malicious way, but
No.
they were quite funny, and they were all like laughing and, you know, whatever. And you just think, oh, this is like, you know, this is a tough one. And I don't know how, but like, I lighted on, you know, talking about storytelling principles, talking about sport, talking about, you know, athletes and their trajectories. And I said, you know, the thing is one of the reasons that we love athletes, you know, they all, you go around the circle, you know, who are your kind of role models? Almost all of them say some sort of Premier League footballer, which I think in a way is kind of undervalued by everybody. You know, Premier League football is, to my mind, the global language. Like, it's not English. You know, Premier League football, you can go anywhere in the world, however remote, and go, well, for me, I'd be like Arsenal, and unfortunately they'd be like Manchester United or something. You just, oh, stop it. But you can have a conversation with people all over the world. And I think with the boys, it's this great wedge in the door, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And with them, I said the things with athletes' lives, they quite often conform to this narrative structure, the hero's journey, which then also informs loads of our stories. And I remember I showed this naughty group, didn't I, the hero's journey, and they were wrapped, and it was
They
this
just
amazing.
loved it.
There's this amazing, and we ended up writing our own story framework using ChatGPT. I was like, let's fill it out. What's the hero's name? What's their challenge? And it was actually, like about someone that maybe they knew. But the point was that the thing that I took away was they want the best version. It's like if you patronize them and if you talk down to them, they will run rings around you or they won't care, because like, isn't that boring? I remember when I was a boy, I was like, yeah, if you patronized me, actually, what would I have done when I was a teenager and people patronized me? And it's like, yeah, I'd have given up on you. You've given up on me.
Yeah. But that's the boys taking boys seriously principles right there. Like, you've just embodied that. It's, we take boys seriously. That's it. It's not about patronizing. It's, you could have easily disengaged from the session and said, well, you're a little bit lively. It's not good. But no, that isn't what happened. You had a high expectation for them, and it was really amazing watching that sea change in the room and seeing that they loved the hero's journey. They loved it, didn't they? And I think that link that you do to kind of like ancient stories. And I remember you explaining, or you were asking about films, I think, or what films that they liked. And you linked it back to ancient stories. And they were like, what? That's not an original? No, that film's not an original. And so enlightening them in that way and showing that stories are eternal in that regard, that they're ancient.
They know more than they think, don't they? I think you were saying, and I remember they knew a lot about myth, and a lot of it was through Fortnite. I think there was lots of, or the Percy Jackson stuff, and I'm like, right, you know these things. I was talking, and I think I had Circe or Song of Achilles or something with me. But saying to them, you actually know all this, but you just don't realize that you're tapping into this storytelling tradition that's thousands of years old. But like they do know these things. And I think I was talking to your friend Alex, I always forget his is it Blower or Blower? Yeah, Blower. And he was saying that most teachers, when he goes and gives talks to teachers about this stuff, that most teachers don't have a TikTok account. And I'm like, teachers, like, in a way, you shouldn't have to spend all your free time on these other things. But I think if you don't know those platforms where the kids are spending their time, it's going to be harder for you to relate in a way. But they're looking at these they're listening to podcasts, they're doing these things. And actually, we had a boy, didn't we? You've mentioned him a couple of times, and he was reading Marcus Aurelius, and it was like, and you just think that's pretty niche. Like, in sort of boys reading terms, that's pretty niche, but it's huge on these podcasts. There's things like Modern Wisdom with Chris Williamson, that sort of thing. These things get brought up as kind of texts or like part of the curriculum of those podcasts. So if the boys are getting clips on these social platforms, following that link through to a podcast, and then maybe reading the book, it's not something that they're all doing, but these are things that are in the water that they swim in.
I agree, and they like nonfiction, and they do like it, and we use a wide variety of research in our work. And Pinkett and Roberts had said that a culture of competition isn't always that helpful, and so we have a culture of personal best. And it's interesting how Aurelius really links into that culture of personal best, and certainly what you were talking about in terms of bettering yourself and the tools you use around you. And you talked about getting up ChatGPT and using it to they were like, he's a writer. But you showed them that the tools were available to them and that they can use that to better themselves. And it's vital that we understand what mediums they're communicating in, because how are we going to understand their lived experience if we don't understand their culture around them? So, and if it wasn't for TikTok, Ben, we wouldn't have you. So, it's a case of needing to be. But Alex does a lot of work around the manosphere and what's on TikTok, and he does go out and talk to teachers about the importance of understanding the narratives that these boys are living in, because we need to understand it. And
I think that relates back to what the boy said to you about success, right? I think he's internalized some ideas from somewhere else. But then the obvious thing is, what is success? And I think getting to challenge them and getting them to explain their own ideas
Yeah.
and actually pushing them on things is part of the value of the sessions, because you just, you know, the old man and the sea, the guys are kind of, everyone looks on him slightly sort of sadly. He's a bit of an old loser, he goes out and he achieves, the greatest thing in his entire life, and he comes home with nothing to show for it but the trophy, essentially.
Yeah.
Was it worth it? Was it not? And then, those things are like, they are windows into these other discussions and they're a kind of soft,
Yeah.
a soft approach that you're not kind of going
But do you? I don't know if you even remember that pivotal moment where they were like, "What? He didn't even get the fish that he." And in terms of resilience, you could see the boys being like, well, then what's the point? And then to have you say, hold on, and to talk them through that, and to talk about, he was left with the skeleton, but what it was the journey, was incredible as a learning moment in that room at that time. It was incredible because we were able to look at the concept of resilience and the concept of trying again and the concept of the value in what you're doing. And you were able to exact that moment with them through the literature. And, on the surface, it could look like he had failed, but we know he hadn't. And
you can think that, I think
yeah.
that's the thing is saying to them, you can take from this what you like. You could make the argument that he did, and he is a failure. But like, you need to justify. You have to back that up. You have to be the one to say those things. It's like,
I love that. Yeah.
And I'd love to do the for various reasons we haven't managed to get it done yet. But I'd love to do the Claire Keegan small things like these. And that's a sort of will he, won't he, act in the world? Will he, won't he act on his principles, and what he feels is right? And I think that is, those big questions are so good for boys. I think, like, to
it's
just be like,
such a good discussion.
What would you do here? I think, like, how do you think that this should go? I think it's a kind of fascinating thing. And I think it is, talk to me a little bit about like challenge, and how are they challenged generally with how they, compared to how they're challenged in the sessions? Maybe is there enough challenge for young boys? Have we shied away from challenge as like a method of talking to them? I mean, like, I was quite shocked when I came down that one time and they said, "Oh, we've all been reading." It's like, great, what is it? And they're like, Marcus Rashford's book. And I was like, well, I'm pretty sure it's a children's book and you guys are teenagers. And it was clearly a kind of minimum, get this done thing. I just thought, oh, that's such a shame, because it was like,
I agreed.
Yeah.
And I do, yes, in answer to your question, the easy answer and the most straightforward answer is yes, we know that there has been a culture of low expectation around boys. And obviously, I'm talking in really broad terms now, Ben. Obviously there hasn't been in every regard, but there has been a low aspiration around boys with language as well. Boys need to run around, therefore they're not going to sit and read. Like, I'm, broad brushstrokes, but that's what I'm talking about. And part of the work that we do is to really challenge educators and adults around these boys on their language, really challenge educators and adults around these boys to know that this low aspiration isn't coming from the boys. And, Alex will be the first one to tell you that boys are not a homogenous group. They're not all the same. However, there are approaches that we can take. And it made me realize that there is still more work to be done around the challenge for these boys, because it's about setting the bar high and then scaffolding them to get there. And that's what you do. That's what we do in the sessions, isn't it? We set the bar high, but then we know that we've got them and they know that we've got them. And Ollie and I always talk about the boys feeling held. They need to feel held. And in a literary sense, that's what we're doing. We're giving them something really difficult and we're saying, but we're here. Someone will read with you. Someone will talk about it with you. Ben's coming back to hold you to account. He's going to expect that, but not in a threatening way. Isn't this great that we're doing this together? And I think within education itself, and I know this because we go into a lot of schools, teachers are really excited to lift that aspiration for boys. Teachers are really excited to learn about the research, to be trained up, to take those steps, to use the boys' principles in order to make it better. Because if you make it better for one cohort, you make it better for them all. And so there is not a lack of educators wanting to raise that bar. We do. And that's why mine and Ollie's work is just so enjoyable and so exciting, because we get to be part of that. And the literacy programme has very much been that real keystone in showing that when you put the expectation there, that the boys will just rise to it. So yes to more challenge, yes to making the boys feel held, yes to hearing their voice, and quite rightly what you said is showing them that they can have an opinion, providing that they know what they're talking about, providing they've done their research and they're able to find elements and to be educated and to be critical thinkers. I think that is something that's lacking in our curriculums right now, is teaching our children to be critical thinkers. And Ollie and I have had this on the back burner for the last year or so, but we want to engage in a programme that creates critical thinking opportunities for our boys, because it's just so important.
And I mean, what has been the broader response to what you've done? I mean, you said like teachers have been really receptive. I mean, do people come to you? Do you go to them? Have you had people kind of resist things a bit? What is there a range of response to what you're talking about, or is it kind of broadly like, yes, we'd like some help?
So yes, broadly, it is definitely yes, help us. So we go into a lot of schools. Ollie and I are booked up through till we don't have enough time to do everything that we're being asked to do, which is great. And considering this started on a tiny spreadsheet in lockdown over FaceTime, it's just absolutely incredible. But yes, we're being invited more and more into large spaces to talk to people about the principles. We're being invited into schools up and down the country to do this work. People come to us to visit, to see. You'll know from your own experience, Ben, that once you come and see our boys, once you come and see what we're doing, it's really hard to shake us. And so, we are so fortunate that from September we have the most packed boys program that we've ever had, and that is because people want to be part of it, because they see that there is a significant deficit and they want to help. And I think that's the message all our boys need to hear, is that we're here, we want to help, we can see things are challenging, we can see the data that tells us that quite abhorrently, tragically, the suicide rate in young males is absolutely outrageous. And we know what the reasons are behind that, but there are people, lots of us, that are putting things in place to help change that narrative, to help turn that around. So I am so proud to say that we're in high demand. I'm so proud to say that our work's being recognised. You know me, I'm one to get emotional, so I'm going to try not to. But I just, I think that it is literally the greatest thing since sliced bread. And I'm so grateful that people see it the way we do. And I just need a time turner because then it'd
all right, Hermione, or Hermione, as I originally called
Hermione.
What I wanted to ask though as well. So, I mean, this work is not at the expense of girls. That's not what that is.
Oh, Ben,
but these sessions that we do, and I don't have the in-person experience of like the other ones you're doing. How possible is it to kind of work these things back into kind of the mainstream curriculum? Because what I've been doing with you guys kind of is sitting alongside that. I'm spending time with these boys out of their usual classes and stuff like that. So how possible is it to integrate these things back into a kind of mainstream environment, but without compromising the experience for everybody else?
No, I get it. It is supracurricular at the moment. It's definitely extracurricular. And we have such an understanding head teacher who allows us to take risks in this way. It has increased the outcomes. And so because there's been an increase in outcomes, that works quite nicely. But it is possible and it isn't possible. I want to say this isn't at the detriment to girls. I am the mum of 3 teenage girls and would never want to see that myself. But how easy is it to work this work into the curriculum? Ben, it's difficult, especially in a school like ours where it's an upper school. And so we are about year 9 through to year 13. And we are about an important business, and that is getting those life opportunities for our students. There are many elements of the literacy program that have been mapped into our English curriculum. There are many aspects of it. To have the luxury to do this small group work and take children out and give everybody the opportunity is not possible. And if there are schools out there that are able to do it, but we wouldn't have the time, we wouldn't have the money, we wouldn't have the capacity to do that. The curriculum time is very limited. There's a lot of content that we have to get through in order to get our students in the best possible place to achieve the best possible outcomes. And so for our school, for our cohort, this has to be extracurricular. And I think there's a whole nother discussion around how suitable this is, how well this curriculum is suited to our boys. That's a whole nother discussion. But we really are not in the position to be. Oh, hello.
Hey, you're back. Sorry, I right in the middle. I don't know what happened. I don't know.
You missed absolute genius. Then you should
I
know.
know. That's why I'm devastated. So yeah.
So I need more time, I need more money, and I need more curriculum time. That's basically what I was saying, Ben. That was basically it. And whilst
where might that come from?
Oh wow, a curriculum overhaul nationally. Yeah, that's the only way it's going to get done. To look at the canon that's used, to consider how we are the keepers of our students' time, and are we reverencing that time well? That's where it's going to come from. Those are big questions. Give Ollie and I a year or so, I'm sure we'll be able to answer them. But for now, it's extracurricular. We are seeing more and more of an appetite for girls to want to be involved in the boys' work that we're doing. And so from September, we are providing that space, and we're really excited about that. Would I love there to be a Ben in every English classroom? Yes, I would. It's not going to happen. However, we do know that there are really significant ways that we can add to the English curriculum and add to the offer by using the Taking Boys Seriously principles in a way that benefits everybody.
Let's kind of refer to the actual tangible results, because we've kind of mentioned them in abstract, I suppose. But for me, I did the first year that we did together, and it was a bit of an experiment, wasn't it? So
yeah.
I didn't want to go crowing about something if it wasn't going to actually do anything. And I think it's important to talk about, have evidence, be able to back up your argument, that kind of thing. So give a bit of sort of overview in terms of the results you've seen from the work.
Yeah, so causation and correlation, all that aside, we know that since we've been having a fully fledged boys program, that we've closed the gap between disadvantaged boys cohort and the main cohort in achieving in English. We know that the boys' Progress 8 score has increased and increased and increased. That feels good. That's tangible outcomes. That brought such joy to my heart, because we had a suspicion it was working, but we knew. And then so that was year 1, right? And so we started chasing other KPIs, and Ollie and I talk about it often, but I think you had asked us, you held us to account, you were coaching us, and you were like, in the second year, you were like, guys, what impact has this had this year? What's it had? And so we went into school. It was closed, it was dark, we couldn't find computers that weren't logged on. So
actually, I remember Ollie being annoyed about this.
Yeah. And so we there were building works going on, and we were like our way through, and we sat in a darkened corner of the send department and looked at the data, and I just cried my eyes out, because I saw that the boys that were engaged in our program, and the boys specifically that were engaged in the literacy program, showed an increase in positive behaviour events and a decrease in exclusions. And so we knew it was working on all fronts.
And I think that's what's been really nice, is that actually, because it's not necessarily just about English or reading books, it's actually the things that you think books might do, actually um does happen. That it helps you relate to other people. It helps you, be a bit of a kind of critical thinker. And then, these it's actually improved like sort of people staff relations. The whole program is
Yes.
super because and then that helps you with the other things that school needs to do. I think that's the important thing. It's not purely about the academic achievement in this one thing.
No.
It's a kind of broader
Yeah.
spectrum of impact. I think that was the thing that really um that I really enjoyed actually as well. And how many
Yeah.
people were then going on, choosing to study English was also nice. But like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the attitude to learning. So, we love data in schools, right? But the attitude to learning, ranking, and the students, the boys that were engaged in the program, we saw an increase in their attitude. And that's across the board, right? It's across the board. And I don't, you can't underestimate the impact that this has had. And, we use KPIs, we use that data in order to, but Ollie and I know the changes that can't be verified by numbers. We see it, and it is really hard, and that sounds really like touchy-feely and soft and fluffy or whatever, but this stuff is powerful. And when we go out and train, we talk about Covey's emotional bank account, and we talk about the impact of positive experiences. And it cannot be denied to see a student puff up in pride because he's read Hemingway and therefore then walks with his head high into the next scenario. It just can't be underestimated. It
Well,
just can't be.
what do you think then if someone was like listening and they can go and look at the principles, the Taking Boys Seriously principles? It's University of Ulster, isn't it, or
It is.
Belfast?
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Ulster.
yeah. And you can see those principles. But I mean, for me, one of the things that I learned was, give them the best version. It was like, okay, who's the all timer? It's like
Hmm.
and big man all time writer is kind of Hemingway, but even he personally, there's some mixed opinions on his character, but
Yeah.
actually even those are an amazing basis for a discussion. It was, he lived a very troubled life. He had traumatic brain injuries. He had substance abuse problems. He obviously ended his life in the worst, in a sort of
Mhm.
horrible manner. And it's kind of, but this was a wealthy all time,
Yeah. Yeah.
this is someone who kind of had it all in some respects. So even that is kind of grist to the mill for discussion with the boys. But I think the thing I thought was like, yeah, what's you need to work to find like what's the best, what will excite them, and they want the best version, and that's your responsibility to give them that. That was kind of one of the things that I picked up from it.
Yeah.
What other things would you say, really struck you about it, or that have worked really well, subsequently?
So with the principles or with our literacy
No,
program?
no, with what we've been doing. Yeah,
With
with what we've been doing.
So I think one of the things was the best, but not the most perfect. So we know that we trust the boys because we don't patronize them, because we listen to their voice, that we can give them warts and all in a way that's appropriate, but we can give them warts and all, and they can use that as a tool. I think that part of the literacy program is showing that we're excited about literature and stories and people and the impact that these things can have on us. That there is a whole world out there that isn't in your phone. There's a whole world in your phone too. We use that too. But there are these wonderful stories that talk about ethics, that talk about morals, that talk about what makes things good. And that you can have access to that and discuss it through your own lens. And I'm aware of how that sounds, but we are about the business of helping boys connect with who they are as men, who they are as young men. And so I think one of my takeaways from the literacy program is that putting the best in front of them and giving them someone to look up to that is willing to say hard things has meant that they are willing to attack hard things and know that they can be successful. Even, do you remember when you did the success doesn't look like that? It's like kind of thing. And you know
No, but I think that's something I would say.
yeah. You
Yeah.
did. And so that's one of the things that I've taken away, is that we owe to them the world. We owe them a lens into the world. And we owe them honesty. That's it. We owe them honesty, not a sugar-coated thing. They can cope with it because stories aren't perfect and people aren't perfect, and they need to know that resilience is important. And I want boys to be resilient because it's not. We want them to do hard things and do it well. And they've learnt that through the literacy program. They've learnt that they can do hard things, and they can do them well.
Yeah, I think giving them, taking down an all-time book is it's something that is totally in your capacity to do. It's like giving them that and being like, this is amazing and you can do it yourself.
Yeah.
And nobody can stop you or tell you otherwise. No one can limit your choice even, right? But this is totally under your power. And I think giving young people the kind of the belief that things are in their power, that they can make their own decisions, that they can pursue hard things is really lovely. And I love coming down to do it. So hopefully we can figure out a way we can do more, because
Ben,
it's
we're
yeah.
going to, and I'm going to be forever grateful that you said yes, because I just think that impact, in my head, I can see the individual boys that work has impacted, but moreover, I can see nationally the impact that has had, and Ollie and I being able to take that out, and I will just be forever grateful you said yes. So thank you so much.
Yeah, well, it's been my pleasure, and thank you for coming here on your Saturday morning, 9 a.m., slightly earlier than I would normally, you know.
There is nowhere else I'd rather be right now, Ben. Nowhere else at all.
But yeah, this is so helpful. I think for me, I don't know the things that the broader context of these things. I don't have the educational background that you have. So for me to understand the broader landscape is super helpful. But I think you have an amazing perspective where you can kind of reconcile, big picture, big theory, boots on the ground. I'm in the classroom every day. I think that's an incredible perspective. So thank you for your time and coming here to share it. And I will, I will get your little mate Oliver on at some point, and
yes, please.
maybe you'll come back, because I think this is, for the moment with these lives, I've been kind of talking to people who have, around this topic, maybe obliquely, like boys and books, and how we kind of get them to do more of it. So just thank you so much.
Thanks, Ben. So grateful for you.
Have a wonderful weekend, everyone. And bye, Deneen.
Bye.
Bye.